Today, we will discuss how the EIS process begins and describe the steps, ending with a publication of Notice of Intent. While this work will not generate a separate written portion of the EIS, it is probably the most critical part of the process, because if the work going into planning for an EIS is not well thought out, the success of the project may be in jeopardy. There are different approaches to initiating an EIS. The 7 steps to initiating an EIS on this slide are adapted from the National Park Service. Each agency uses roughly the same steps, but they're tailored to the mission of the agency and thus may be worded slightly differently. With this in mind, let's consider what is involved in each step. To get the process going, the first question is to answer, why are we taking action? Usually something has occurred that requires an agency to address an event. The answer to our question begins with the word because. The because statement identifies the problem or problems to be solved. For instance, rain is coming in through the window. Since we do not want rain to come in through the window, an action is needed. Because the window is broken identifies the problem to be solved. It sounds simple, but sometimes the reason for taking an action and the problem to be solved are not clearly thought out before an EIS is initiated. After establishing the need for an action, we identify the purpose and objectives, also referred to as goals. Your goals are the reason for proposing the action. With your goals in mind, you're ready to prepare a proposal. As shown in this slide, CEQ defines when an agency is ready to prepare a proposal. Because you are only in the beginning stages of the EIS process, the proposal may or may not be specifically defined and developed. At this early stage, that is not a problem or a reason not to proceed. The proposal can be altered and or refined as more knowledge is accumulated. With the proposal drafted, we can now consider the issue and or problems to address in order to reach our goals. In an EIS, the responsible agency will have an interdisciplinary team, or IDT, that is working on the EIS. Because many disciplines must be considered in an EIS, a team consisting of experts is needed in each of the disciplines that will be a factor in completing the EIS. Typically, once the IDT is created, they will begin to meet and will conduct what is called internal scoping. You can think of this as a brainstorming session. Once the IDT has what they believe is a good starting point, public and agency involvement can begin. As a result of internal and external scoping, and perhaps an initial public meeting, the IDT will determine if the proposed action will have environmental impacts. In the EIS process, the IDT will develop a preliminary set of alternatives and analyze them to determine if any will either eliminate or mitigate for the predicted impacts while still allowing for the proposed action to proceed. Depending on the outcome, the IDT may have several iterations of this process as they narrow the list of alternatives to ones that will be analyzed in detail in the EIS. With a reasonable set of alternatives identified, you and your team can determine if sufficient information exists to address the issues raised in the alternatives. By doing this, you will also identify gaps in the existing data that need to be filled in order to proceed with the EIS. One of the common mistakes made at the beginning of an EIS is to start collecting data before you have identified the purpose and need. The information you gather and then include in your EIS may not be needed and is one of the factors that contributes to unnecessarily long EISs. Often, missing data cannot be collected immediately, so the process of predicting the impacts of each alternative relies on existing information. Remember, we're still in the phase of initiating the EIS, and what we are discussing here is not the alternative analysis portion of the EIS. The intent at this point is to examine the initial alternatives and predict which of them will have a noticeable impact. We will assume that as a result of completing the 7 steps, the decision is that an EIS is needed. As a result of this initial work, you should have a good understanding of the proposed action and the issues and alternatives you will need to address in the EIS. The last step is to make your intentions known by writing and publishing the Notice of Intent, or NOI, to prepare an EIS. This is a formal document that is made available to the public. It signifies you are beginning to prepare the EIS. The NOI does three things: describes the proposed action and possible alternatives, describes the agency's proposed scoping process, including whether, when, and where any scoping meetings will be held, and states the name and address of a person within the agency who can answer questions about the proposed action and the environmental impact statement. In summary, the steps taken and the information learned when initiating an EIS set the stage for the formal preparation of the EIS. It's tempting to dig in and try and formulate the conclusions of the EIS at this stage. However, for now, you just want to gain an overall picture of the proposed action, data and information, and potential alternatives. Once the process is completed and it is clear that an EIS is needed, you prepare the Notice of Intent and you're ready to begin work.